Every revolution begins with a single, defiant sound. This one did not start in a hallowed concert hall or a state-of-the-art studio. It started with the crisp rustle of a rejection letter, the sigh of a dream deferred, and the determined click of a basement light switch. This is the story of a melody that refused to be silenced. Of a boy who was told his music was too much and not enough, all at once. It's a testament to the alchemy of passion and perseverance, how a no, sharp and discordant, can be transformed into a symphony more breathtaking than any yes could have ever allowed. Prepare to meet Elijah. The conservatory's Rejection was the last note of his old life. What came next was his masterpiece. The envelope was crisp, white, and final. Elijah's name was printed in a sterile, official font that felt at odds with the swirling, emotional script of the music he had poured into his audition. His heart, a frantic timpani against his ribs, stilled to a dead silence as he read the words. "We regret to inform you." The rest blurred into a symphony of failure. The towering, ornate gates of the Aethelred Conservatory, which he had imagined passing through every day, now felt like a barrier to a world that had deemed him unworthy. The rejection wasn't just a no, it was a diagnosis. His music, the very essence of his being, was declared unpolished and too unconventional. He stood there, a solitary figure dwarfed by the institution's legacy, the crisp paper feeling like a lead weight in his suddenly numb hands. The walk home was a funeral procession for a dream that hadn't even been born. Each step echoed the conservatory's critique. Unconventional, unpolished. Were Beethoven's first compositions polished? Did Bach conform? The questions were a weak defense against a crushing wave of doubt. His small bedroom, plastered with posters of composers and producers alike, felt like a mockery. He picked up his worn violin, its wood warm and familiar under his chin, but no note came. The music that usually flowed so freely was trapped behind a dam of institutional judgment. For the first time in his life, the silence in his head was absolute and terrifying. Days bled into a gray haze, friends called with cautious, pitying voices. His family tiptoed around him, their encouragement feeling hollow. The world had lost its color, its soundtrack. He found himself in the dusty, neglected basement, a place of storage and forgotten things. It was cold and smelled of old books and damp concrete. But it was also quiet and private, and away from the well-meaning but painful looks upstairs. In this isolation, a single, defiant ember began to glow in his chest. They had rejected his language, but they couldn't silence his voice. The anger came next, hot and clarifying. It wasn't a destructive rage, but a forging fire. Unconventional? He would show them unconventional. Unpolished? He would redefine Polish. His eyes scanned the cluttered basement with a new purpose. That old, slightly out of tune upright piano against the wall wasn't junk. It was a foundation. The battered laptop he used for school, its fan whirring like a tired bee, could be a workstation. This wouldn't be a shrine to what he lacked. It would be a cathedral built from what he had. A fierce, passionate resolve settled in his soul. He began to scavenge. He visited thrift stores, garage sales, and even the electronics recycling bin behind the local community college. He returned with treasures, a microphone with a frayed cord, a pair of monitor speakers one neighbor was throwing out, a vintage audio interface another considered obsolete. His savings, once meant for conservatory supplies, were spent on cables, adapters, and second-hand software. The basement transformed from a dumping ground into a chaotic workshop, a physical manifestation of a dream refusing to die. The final piece was a small USB MIDI keyboard he bought online. It was cheap and plasticky, a far cry from the grand pianos of the conservatory. But when he plugged it in, its lights blinking to life, it represented something far greater, possibility. He sat on an old stool, surrounded by his salvaged empire, and placed his fingers on the keys. He took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of dust and determination. The silence was no longer an enemy, it was a canvas. And he was ready to paint. The first sounds were hesitant, exploratory. A simple chord progression on the piano, recorded into the laptop. Then, a searching melody on his violin, its raw acoustic sound captured by the frayed microphone. He layered them, playing with digital effects, warping the classical sound into something ethereal. It was clumsy. It was rough. But it was his. For hours, he lost himself in the process, the outside world fading away until the only thing that existed was the glow of the screen and the flow of ideas. Failure was a forgotten concept in the face of creation. He became a musical alchemist, fusing opposing elements. He'd sample the melancholic swell of a cello suite and weave it through a deep, pulsing electronic bass line. He'd record the intricate counterpoint of a Bach fugue and then slice it digitally, rearranging the phrases into a new, hypnotic rhythm. His unpolished style became his signature. The slight breath of the bow on a string, the faint click of the piano's mechanics, all left in the mix to add texture and authenticity. His basement was a laboratory, and every experiment was a step toward a new sonic language. His hands became stained with solder from fixing wires, his clothes perpetually dusty. He learned through online tutorials and pure, stubborn trial and error. A blown speaker was a setback, a corrupted file, a lesson in backing up work. The physical struggle of building his studio mirrored his internal journey. He was building not just tracks, but resilience. Each solved problem was a small victory, each finished song a monumental triumph over the rejection that had once paralyzed him. He named his nascent project the Basement Symphony, a title that embraced his roots rather than hiding them. He created an online profile and uploaded his first track, Closed Door Overture. It began with the sound of a creaking door and a faint, echoing piano, which slowly erupted into a defiant, beautiful storm of orchestral strings and aggressive synth waves. He didn't expect anyone to hear it. He released it into the digital ether like a message in a bottle, a declaration of his existence to an empty sea. Days turned into weeks. The track had a handful of plays, mostly from friends. The comment sections were empty. The dream of being discovered felt naive. Yet, Elijah persisted. The joy was in the creation itself, in the act of proving to himself that his music had value, with or without validation. The basement was no longer a place of exile. It was a sanctuary. His fingers flew across keys and strings, translating the complex emotions in his heart into a unique, genre-defying sound. A close friend, Maya, came to visit. She found him hunched over his equipment, eyes closed, completely absorbed as he conducted a complex mix of harp and glitchy percussion. She watched, mesmerized, not just by the sound, but by the raw passion on his face. Without a word, she took out her phone and began to film. She captured the intense focus, the way his body moved with the music, the dim basement light glinting off the strings of his violin. She saw not a rejected applicant, but an artist in his purest state. Maya posted the video with a simple caption: "Witness my genius friend creating magic in his basement. This is what passion sounds like." She tagged it with #unconventional #basement symphony #music maverick. For the first 24 hours, it lingered in obscurity. Then, a popular music curation account with an eye for the unique shared it. The algorithm, that mysterious modern gatekeeper, took notice. The view count began to climb, first in dozens, then in hundreds. The message in a bottle had been found. Elijah's phone began to buzz incessantly. He ignored it, deep in a recording session. It was only when he surfaced for air, hours later, that he saw the notifications. His social media was flooded. The video had tens of thousands of views. His track, Closed Door Overture, had hundreds of plays. He refreshed the page, and the numbers jumped again. His heart hammered against his ribs, not with anxiety, but with a disbelieving, exhilarating shock. He read the comments, his eyes wide. "This is incredible. What genre is this? I need more. Mozart meets EDM in a dream." The wave kept growing. Music bloggers picked up the story. Local Reject's basement project goes viral. They framed his rejection from the conservatory not as a failure, but as a catalyst for his authentic art. The narrative was irresistible. The institution versus the innovator, the polished versus the passionate. News outlets did short segments on the basement virtuoso. Suddenly, the world was listening. His humble, cobbled-together studio had become a global stage, and his audience was hungry for more. Emails began pouring into a previously empty inbox, collaboration requests, questions about his process, fan art inspired by his music. He tried to respond to as many as he could, his head spinning. Among the flood of notifications, one email subject line stood out: Aesthetic Records, Professional Inquiry. His breath caught. Aesthetic was a respected indie label known for its eclectic roster and artist-first mentality. They were famous for betting on raw, unusual talent. He opened the email, his hands trembling slightly. It was from the founder herself, Clara Evans. She wrote how she'd been sent the video and had immediately listened to everything he had online. She didn't offer empty praise. She spoke specifically about his fusion of classical depth with modern energy, calling it groundbreaking and emotionally resonant. The closing line made his vision blur: "We believe in what you're building. Let's create together." The boy rejected for being too unconventional was now being sought out because of it. A video call was scheduled. Clara Evans was sharp, insightful, and passionate. She didn't want to change his sound. She wanted to amplify it. She talked about providing him with better resources, not to replace his basement setup, but to complement it. She spoke of creative freedom, of a partnership. It wasn't a corporate contract. It was an invitation to join a family of artists. Elijah ended the call, paced his basement, and let out a shout of pure, unadulterated joy that echoed through the foundation of his house. Signing the contract was surreal. It was done not in a skyscraper office, but over his basement desk, with Maya as a witness. He used a pen he'd bought from the corner store. The moment was profoundly authentic, a perfect reflection of his journey. The first advance payment felt astronomical. His first purchase wasn't flashy. It was a high-quality audio interface and a new microphone cable. He was investing back into the very foundation of his dream, upgrading his tools while honoring his roots. Work began on his debut album. Clara was true to her word. She sent a brilliant but unassuming sound engineer, Rohan, to work with Elijah in his basement. They didn't relocate to a sterile, professional studio. They elevated the basement symphony to a professional standard. They treated the space not as a limitation, but as an instrument itself, capturing its unique acoustics and character. The process was a collaborative dream, a meeting of minds dedicated to preserving the raw soul of the music. The album took shape, a narrative of resilience told in sound. Tracks were named after his journey: Dust and Determination, The Algorithm's Nod, Virtuoso's Path. He worked with a fervor he never knew possible, every note infused with the memory of the rejection letter, the long nights, the doubt, and the ultimate victory of self-belief. The music was messy, soulful, and beautifully impossible to categorize. And that was its greatest strength. A month before the album's release, Clara organized a small, intimate live performance in a trendy loft space. It was for influencers, music critics, and die-hard fans who had followed him from the first viral video. As Elijah walked onto the small stage, seeing his basement setup replicated under the lights, he felt a wave of nerves. Then he saw Maya grinning in the front row. He sat down, closed his eyes, and played. The room fell utterly silent, then erupted in applause that was less about noise and more about felt emotion. The reviews for the live show were rapturous. They spoke of his technical skill, yes, but more about the palpable passion and the unique auditory experience. The buzz for the album, OFFBEAT VIRTUOSO, reached a fever pitch. The story was irresistible, but the music was what truly captivated people. He was no longer just an internet sensation. He was a serious artist with a powerful debut poised to make waves. Release day arrived. Elijah spent it in his basement, not out of anxiety, but out of reverence. He listened to the final mastered album from start to finish in the very space where it was born. As the last note of the final track faded, he sat in the comfortable silence, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek. It was a tear of pride, of closure, and of immense gratitude for the closed door that had forced him to build his own house of sound. OFFBEAT VIRTUOSO debuted to critical and commercial acclaim. It charted on indie lists and even broke into the mainstream top 100. Listeners from all walks of life connected with its emotional honesty. Classical aficionados appreciated the technique. Electronic fans loved the beats. Everyone was moved by the story it told. Elijah's phone rang again, but this time it was offers for licensing, festival slots, and interviews on major platforms. He did an interview with a prominent music magazine. The interviewer asked about the conservatory rejection. Elijah smiled, no trace of bitterness left. "That letter was the best thing that ever happened to me," he said. "It forced me to trust my own ear above anyone else's. It taught me that sometimes, a no just means not here. Your path is yours to build, even if you have to build it in a basement with salvaged parts." His words resonated, becoming a mantra for other creatives facing rejection. He was invited to perform at a major music festival. Standing in the wings, he heard the crowd chanting his name. The stage was massive, a world away from his basement. As he walked out, the roar was deafening. He began his set not with a bang, but with the same creaking door sample that opened his first track. The crowd fell silent, then cheered. He had brought his basement to the main stage, and they loved him for it. After the festival, a package arrived at his home. It was from the head of the Aethelred Conservatory. Inside was a letter of congratulations and a formal invitation, not to apply as a student, but to give a guest lecture on innovation in modern music composition. The circle was complete. He had not just found success outside their system. He had earned a place to teach them something new. Elijah used his platform and resources to start a foundation called the Basement Symphony Project, which provided grants and equipment to young, underserved musicians, giving them the tools to create without waiting for permission from traditional institutions. He mentored them, sharing his knowledge and his philosophy. Your value is not determined by the doors that open for you, but by the music you build behind the doors you open for yourself. One evening, Elijah descended into his basement. It was now a professional-grade studio, but his original salvaged keyboard sat proudly on a stand in the corner, a relic and a reminder. He was working on his second album, under no pressure but his own creative drive. He looked around at the space that had been his prison, his workshop, his sanctuary, and his launchpad. He had built a world here, note by note. He put on his headphones, hit record, and began to play. The OFFBEAT Virtuoso was home. Years later, the story of the OFFBEAT Virtuoso had settled into the music industry's lore, a modern fable told to inspire new artists. Elijah's name was now synonymous with innovative, genre-defying sound, and his albums lined the shelves of critics and fans alike. He had won awards, played legendary venues, and his foundation had launched a dozen brilliant careers. Yet, on a quiet autumn evening, he found himself once again in the heart of it all, his basement. The space was different now, a seamless blend of the old and the new. State-of-the-art equipment hummed softly on a reclaimed wood desk, but beside it sat the original, scratch-filled upright piano and the plasticky MIDI keyboard, kept as sacred relics. The air no longer smelled of dust, but of polished wood and warm electronics, yet the essence, the soul of the place, remained unchanged. He was composing, not for an album or a deadline, but for the sheer, unadulterated joy of it. A new melody, fragile and hopeful, began to weave its way through the speakers. It was a sound that felt both familiar and entirely new, a testament to a journey that never truly ends. Outside, the world moved on, always searching for the next big thing. But down here, time was measured in measures and heartbeats. Elijah smiled, his fingers finding a new chord progression. The symphony was never finished. It was simply waiting for the next note. Elijah's story started with a closed door and a single, defiant choice, to create anyway. His basement wasn't just a room. It was a rebellion. His music wasn't just sound. It was a testament to the power of raw, unfiltered passion. He didn't wait for permission. He didn't wait for the perfect tools. He started with what he had, where he was. Now, it's your turn. What melody is burning inside you, waiting for an escape? What dream have you been putting off because you're waiting for the right time, the right resources, or the right approval? Stop waiting. Your canvas is blank. Your page is empty. Your instrument is silent. Your idea is just a thought, but it doesn't have to be. Start where you are. Use what you have. Build your own basement symphony. Share your first step with us. Tell us about the dream you're choosing to nurture today. Tag your journey with #MyBasementSymphony and inspire someone else to begin theirs. The world doesn't need another echo. It needs your unique, unconventional, and utterly irreplaceable voice. Begin.